Hello everyone. I think everyone is there on the other side of this screen, so I'm going to start talking. So welcome to, I know we've got a few people dialed in already, and I'm sure there'll be a couple of others straggling in at the end or as we go through. But welcome to everyone who's joined us to our first Explorers edition. Pretty exciting. My name's Ben, and I'll be taking you through a bunch of the coffees that we're going to taste today and talking a little bit about some of the info behind them. Look, we're constantly tasting and living these coffees, but look, to be honest, it's always way more fun when we're sharing this with other people and brewing it up and being able to share it around. So welcome to the digital table that we're all gathered around, and thanks for pulling up a seat here. We're going to have a good chat about some awesome people and the tasty coffees that they're turning out. On that note, I'd like to introduce my colleague here, Matt Slater. He is my director of coffee, or our director of coffee at Five Senses. He leads our roasting teams and oversees all of our sourcing and logistics for the whole Five Senses coffee program. So welcome, Matt.
Wow, thanks, Ben. What an introduction. Your coffee. Your director of coffee, amazing. I love it.
Personal director of coffee. Yes.
How we exist. This is our new isolation life, I guess. But this is my very first virtual cupping, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I hope everybody on the other side of the screens is all geared up for some very tasty coffees that we're going to go through. So yeah, thanks for joining us.
We also have joining us Jay Holland. He's our head roaster of over 15 years, dialing in from the West Coast. So welcome, Jay.
Thank you, Ben, and hello to everyone. Hello, Matt. Hello, Ben. It's great to be here. I can't wait to taste these coffees with you guys, even though we're not together. This will be fun. We've never done this one before. This is exciting stuff.
Yeah, it should be really good. Hopefully it all goes off without a hitch. But look, everything today is going to be pretty relaxed. It's the first time that we've done this, so please treat us gentle. No doubt there will be a few little technical hiccups and hitches, so just be patient. We'll kind of work through them, and otherwise you've got coffee in front of you, hopefully, and that'll make everything okay. But look, we did put a few bits of information together to help you build a more complete picture of kind of the coffees that we're talking about in the background there. Because it is our first time, any feedback or suggestions about how we could improve things and what you really loved, we'd love to get hold of those and hear about them. So please kind of let us know. During the presentation, you should see down the bottom of your screen, there's a little Q&A button. If you click on that, you can actually submit questions as we go along. And in the background, we have our amazing Nicole. Say hi, Nicole.
Hi, everybody.
Nicole is fielding all of those questions, and hopefully we'll get a few chances there to answer them, and she'll be no doubt able to throw in a few answers there herself as well. So look, last week we roasted up 3 different coffees from Acacia Hills and sent them out. So for all of those of you who ordered the packs, you should have them in your hot little hands. And if you've managed to hold off drinking them all, well done. But don't worry, now is the time. We're going to crack these open and have a good taste. And for those of you who didn't manage to get hold of the coffees, don't worry about it. I think most of them are still available on the website, and you can go and grab a bag of these afterwards if you're keen to do that. All right, so what are we diving into today? We're going to be chatting about Acacia Hills, which is based out of northern Tanzania. We're going to be talking a little bit about the coffees, the owners and the people behind it, and the land that kind of that brought all of this to life. And in just a moment, we're going to get into brewing these coffees and talking about it all live alongside you, and kind of delving in a little bit to kind of the background to each of them. We're going to be preparing these using a traditional cupping technique, or the traditional cupping method. But you're more than welcome to just prepare these as your normal filter coffee, or however you make filter coffee at home, and that'll be totally fine as well. Because cupping takes a little bit of time and it kind of occurs across a couple of stages, we're going to get into preparing some of this pretty much straight off, and then slide into talking to a little bit more of the background of the coffees in further on. But look, if you have any questions as we go through, as I said, pop them in the Q&A section, and we'll try and answer those as best we can. All right. So Matt, can you run us through a little bit of the coffees that we've got on the table? What's in front of everyone here?
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. There's some 3 cracking coffees here. As you said, they're all from Acacia Hills estate, so all 3 are from the same estate, and they're all from Tanzania, one of my favourite coffee growing countries. They are from what we refer to as current harvest, so they're actually from they were harvested between May 2019 and September 2019. The coffees were then rested, they were milled, they were bagged, ready for export. Then they shipped out of Tanzania in December of 2019, went via Mombasa, went via Malaysia, and then arrived in Fremantle, Australia in February of this year. And then they were very, very happily received into our roasteries, and have been roasted up and now sat in front of you guys. So amazing that you know, it's such a complex journey, and they've arrived, and I can't wait to get stuck in. But before we get stuck in, I wanted to kind of go through the coffees themselves. So we've got 3 separate coffees over 4 different coffee varieties. Okay, so there's 4 different coffee varieties here, and we're going to dig into the first one, which is what we call our BK lot. So B stands for Bourbon, the K stands for Kent. You should be able to see on the slide deck there. There's our wonderful friends at World Coffee Research have got an amazing variety catalogue. So you're going to go and dig in there. Tells you a little bit about the Bourbon. So one of the most important and widespread Arabica varieties in the world, and it's known for its excellent cook quality, but it's not known for its kind of disease resistance. It grows incredibly tall, but as I say, it's not been resistant to some of the changes that we've experienced in our climate that have kind of allowed coffee disease to run rife. So it's been swapped out in some of the countries that Bourbon was from, in which mainly Central and South America. Now it's just amazing there. It's just amazing. We'll get stuck in and you can see exactly what it is. Originates from Yemen, introduced to Bourbon Island by the French, which is now known as Reunion Island. So that's where the name comes from. Then we've got the second variety part of this amazing coffee, the Kent variety. Very tolerant to a lack of water, which is great for its growing in East Africa, and was originally renowned for its coffee leaf rust resistance. It is, however, quite susceptible to coffee berry disease. It's Bourbon related, so it's from the Bourbon family, and it originates from around about 1911 in India, on the Kent estate in Mysore in India. It's widely grown across India at the time, and introduced to Tanzania. So some of the kind of more traditional Tanzanian coffees that you'll find there will have Kent variety in there. Grown at around between 1600 and 1900 meters above sea level, both of these coffees, and both the washed process. Then we're going to move on to our next slide, onto the Pacamara. So the Pacamara variety, wow, well, relatively quite a bit younger than the rest. It's actually a hybrid between the Pacas variety and the Margajipe variety. Originates from El Salvador from the 1950s. If you cracked open your coffees to get the grind done, you'll see that the bean of the Pacamara is huge, massive, and the taste is very distinctive. It can divide some people, but you know we'll go through. It's one of my favorite coffees. Love it. It can deliver exceptional cook quality. Yeah, it's not. It's quite susceptible to coffee leaf rust, so it's kind of been replanted with many others. But it's Central American and South American variety, but it's found its way over to Tanzania. You'll hear more about that journey later. The Pacas family are still really prevalent in coffee in El Salvador. I don't know if any of you have kind of bumped into some of the Pacas family, but they're amazing bunch of people. You've got Federico Pacas, the Café Tuxpan, and you have Lorena Pacas Ludlow in the UK. Very lucky to have worked with Lorena a couple of times promoting El Salvador coffees in the community over there in Europe. This grows at 1800 meters above sea level, and again it's a wash process. And then we move on to last but not least, we have the Geisha, and this is a honey process Geisha as well. anyway, so the Geisha variety is originally from Ethiopia. It actually went to Tanzania first before it then went over to Costa Rica. From Costa Rica over to Panama, where you will know it from. The Panama version of this variety wasn't widely planted, to be fair. It was quite weak on the branches, and so therefore it wasn't particularly robust. However, always been an amazing, always really complex florals. But it didn't really come back into prominence up until it was entered into the Best of Panama competition in 2005 by the Peterson family, and it sold for over $20 a pound US, and has been doing that ever since, pretty much. Beautiful coffee. I mean, it speaks for itself, and that's where I'll leave it, because we're going to let these coffees do the talking for sure.
Great stuff. Thanks, Matt, for a really great little overview there of all the different lots that we've got in front of us. And look, obviously that situation, or the situation we have here in front of us, of 3 different coffees from a very small plot of land, very like they're side by side, with such thorough kind of information behind them available to us, is really a great result out of these long-term direct relationships with producers, and certainly something that we can celebrate today. So, all right, let's get into checking out these coffees. So for all of those of you at home, if you haven't already, quickly grind through each of the coffees and get those prepped. All of the instructions for preparing it as a traditional cupping in the email that we sent you previously, so refer to that if you need to. And if you're just brewing it up as a filter coffee, go for that and prepare all 3 as you would normally. We ground our samples just prior to starting, and so we've just capped these off to keep the fragrance in, but let's take those off and get in and have a little bit of a smell of these. So we'll start with our first lot, which is, as Matt said, the Bourbon Kent, or we're just going to call it the BK lot from here on out. So we're going to start with the BK lot, and we've just got the dry grounds, no water in them yet, that we're going to have a smell of. So immediately what jumps out at me is like a really beautiful toasty characteristic. It just smells satisfying. There's some really nice little bits of caramel and honey in there, and those kind of, as I said, that toasty characteristic. Matt, what are you kind of finding in the BK lot? Oh, I think Matt might be muted. He's telling us very interesting things though.
I was actually telling you. Can you hear me now? I hope.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I was telling you that it's very weird to be cupping sat down. So that's what I was telling you. So not very interesting. But what I can tell you about the coffee is that you've nailed it really. I mean, you know, there's tons of kind of honeyed character in there. You can smell the richness. There's like caramelization of the roast. It's just beautiful. I mean, from this, you can't really detect. You obviously can't smell sweetness, but you can definitely. You get hints of it, and you can definitely get a hint of kind of citrus fruit there. But I'm really interested to kind of get your take on it, you and Jay and everybody else, of kind of what kind of fruit that might be. But yeah, it smells gorgeous. Yeah,
it's going to be great to get in and taste it. All right, so moving along to the next lot here, we've got the Pacamara lot, the humongous beans. So have a little bit of a smell of that one first. And this one, again, I'm kind of getting that nice toasty characteristic, but there's a little bit more fruit coming out of it. It's not quite as deep or as rich to me. What about you, Matt?
No, it's, as I said before, the Pacamara is one of my favorites. So, I mean, to me, because it always displays a certain characteristic, and I can smell it even on the fragrance and aroma, it's got kind of a sweet savory to me, but like caramelized onion, and it's like really kind of smell depth. It's really rich. Honeyed again, some floral notes on there for me as well, like more honeysuckle and jasmine.
Yeah, nice. All right, and certainly not last, but here we have the Geisha lot, the 3rd coffee. And there's so much going on in the cup there. Huge amounts of aromatics. Jay, what's it like smelling that on the West Coast?
Yeah, well. I could almost smell it as I reached in to grab my cup. it's one of those coffees that it's so you know, it's fruit driven, but it sort of leaves you guessing, like, what are these flavors going to be? It's really interesting, like that you can, Matt touched on it before, I find exactly the same with this. You can't necessarily smell sweetness, but you can almost guarantee that's going to be sweet and juicy, you know, once we get to cup that.
Yeah, there's some great aromas coming off it. It smells pretty exciting. All right, well, let's get some water onto these samples. What you want to do, when we pour our water on, you want to start your timer straight away, and we're going to let that steep for 4 minutes if you're doing a traditional cupping. Ignore everything I say if you're just brewing up your own filter. You want to have your water ready at about 95 degrees in the kettle if you can dial it in, and otherwise just let your kettle come off the boil for about 60 seconds just to drop down in temperature. And we want to do that so that as we pour the water onto our grinds here, it's going to be about 93 degrees, which is the temperature you want it to be at. Now, that might sound really specific, but the goal here is to have everything the same, so we're comparing apples to apples. So as you pour the water in, just make sure you top it up all the way to the rim. As Matt said, a little awkward for us pouring and cupping sitting down, but we'll get there. All right, so we're going to let that steep, as I said, for 4 minutes. And then when 4 minutes come, we're going to break the crust of grinds on the surface of that. You can see that the water and the coffee have formed like a layer on the top, and we're going to use our spoon to gently push back that crust. It'll sink and it'll release a lot of the aromas that are going to give us that a suggestion of what we'll be tasting in the cup. Now, this traditional cupping method here, it's a pretty internationally standardized procedure. It's used for assessing coffees and scoring all the different attributes of that coffee. So like its flavor, its body, its acidity, and so on. We're going to be using the preparation method here rather than the full scoring, because that takes quite a little bit of time and requires a pretty serious bit of concentration, which is not really what this is about here. So we've kind of prepped that as we go. But in terms of moving through this, Jay, like obviously these three coffees, as Matt said, they're coming from quite different lots, but the green coffee was quite different as well, right? In terms of the moisture, the density, the size of that. What were these coffees like to roast up?
Yeah, well, obviously, you got to treat them completely different. It is amazing that they come from the same soil, you know, in the same region with the same climate, but these different varieties treated differently, different process. They're going to roast differently completely. I think one of the biggest things to probably point out with the, well, I suppose first the normal BK, it actually, it's almost been from year to year very, very dialed in. You know, we didn't have to move that very much to find a really good sweet spot. Whereas the Pacamara is a completely different story. And the Geisha, once again, is just always going to be tricky. The Pacamara, just the sheer size of the bean, they're not necessarily dense beans, actually quite low in density, but you need to really applicate a lot of heat early, and then because of the size of the bean, that kinetic energy that's building, you have to really slow it up and control that development towards the end to get the right sweet spot. At the end, we found it needed a lot more development, but done very delicately. And then the Geisha, we obviously want to get the inherent characteristics and those flavors out. And one of those is that really big sweet fruit that we want to get out. And so we're going to roast that a little bit quicker, slightly lower drop temp, and get that bright, juicy acid to try and get it round and balanced, but to really be how you would have expected it to be when we first cupped it in the lab at Acacia Hills. Yeah,
awesome. Cool. Well, and thank you to yourself and all of the roasting team for turning out not only these lots, but all the rest of the coffee that's certainly getting me through isolation times. It was very important. All right, so we're almost at 4 minutes and we're about to break the crust of our coffee. So you should have those in front of you and hopefully they're almost ready. You can see some of them have kind of sunk a little bit more than others, just depending on the density. as I said, you don't want to like mix this right up. All we're doing is pushing back that crust gently from front to back of the cup, and you'll notice once you do that 3 times, it'll sink to the bottom, but get nice and close because it's going to give you a lot of that breakout of aromas there. All right, so let's get into that. Yeah, great. So there's definitely that immediate release. Matt, what's coming out on the break there for you?
Oh, just that honey. The honey's just amazing. Like, just like really buttery honey. So like, loads of richness there from that BK lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really beautiful. All right, and then move along to the Panama. Oh, sorry, not the Panama. It's the Pacamara. Not even from Panama. That one's like pretty different again. I'm getting definitely that peach character is what really highlights for me in the Pacamara, just straight off the top. How's that for you?
Yeah, I mean the florals are even more there now. I mean with that kind of the water on there, you know, that depth that we're talking about before as well is a lot more easier to ascertain. Yeah, I mean just glorious. I mean for me, I don't know if anybody else gets it, but you know that kind of that savoury sweet element for me has always been there for Pacamara, and so I get something of that too. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I can kind of see what you're saying with the savoury sweet. I mean, certainly that kind of move to slightly lighter, fresher kind of characteristics of the tropical fruit as well. It's kind of an interesting interplay. And then our last coffee, the Aroma Bomb here of the Geisha. It's kind of delivering everything that it promised in the dry fragrance there. Jay, how's the favourite coffee there for you?
Yeah, well, I've secretly done some filter brews of SB9s, so I'm tasting it how some of these guys might be tasting it, you out there. And it's really good. I maybe probably fractionally overbrewed it, to tell you the truth, but you can tell it's juicy. You can tell that that it's a really balanced cup for such a vibrant, you know, sort of a flavored coffee. So
yeah, there's a lot of like the beautiful thing about this coffee, I think, is the combination of both those floral kind of very delicate characteristics and then all of these layers of fruit that are underneath it. And why we smell the coffee as both dry grinds and as wet here is to give us that leading suggestion of what we're likely to taste in the cup, and we'll get to that in a moment. So I'm just clearing off the surface of these cups of any loose grinds. You can just use a couple of spoons to scoop that off. I'm going to pop that off to the side. All right, so we're going to leave those coffees for a little bit just to cool down. But let's have a chat a little bit more about the background of kind of how these coffees, not just the lots, but how these coffees came to life. Matt, can you help us orientate a little bit? Like, we're talking about Acacia Hills, we're talking about Tanzania, but like, where is that in the context of coffee producing and where we are right now?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I can tell you a little bit about the Acacia Hills and Five Senses relationship, but there's other people who can tell you a lot more, and they will be actually delivering that information to you through some videos that Jay's coordinated. So you'll be hearing from the owners of Acacia Hills, and they are Adine and Leon Christianakis, based in Tanzania, and Max Stell from Portland Coffee Roasters, based in Portland, US. Now I've got my own kind of little stories about meeting Mark and the crew, but like I said, there's a lot more people more informed. This relationship actually predates me by several years. I'm obviously fairly new to Fives, joined mid 2018. I've inherited an amazing relationship full of trust, integrity, collaboration. It's been absolutely immense to kind of to inherit this and to really kind of be the steward of its evolution. So yeah, I'm in a very lucky position, but I'm not going to spend too much time talking about Acacia Hills because there's other people who will do a much better job than me. But we've been buying bulk and individual lots for a number of years, and a number of people have visited. You'll hear a little bit from Jay who visited very recently last year. So yeah, he'll be telling you a few more bits and pieces. But I wanted to kind of set the scene of where Tanzania sits geographically. We've all said Tanzania is in Africa, and you know the slide that you got up in front of you now shows where 5 Cents Coffee over in Melbourne there. So Ben and I are sat in Rosman Street in Melbourne Central, West Melbourne, and it is 11,472 kilometres over to the crater. So not a quick drive, and as Jay will probably tell you all about, yeah, a fair journey for sure. Yeah, so it's a long way away. So you see, it's nestled there in East Africa, and if we go to the next slide, Nicole, that'd be great. Thank you. So you can see closer there that actually borders some amazing coffee origins, coffee grain origins that you're aware of as well. So Burundi, Rwanda, Kenya, Uganda. So you can see there the Acacia Hills and the Ngorongoro crater sit in the northern part of Tanzania, close to the Kenyan border. Super rich volcanic soils, amazing altitude, just amazing terroir, just sublime. There's a few bits of coffee stats for you on there, but you can see that the harvest period, as you see, May to September, we've just spoken about already. Tons of different varieties out there, Bourbon, Kents. But you can also see that we've got the capital and the port, the major port out of Tanzania is Dar es Salaam, where our coffee goes to get exported from. And you can see Mombasa above, where it tranships. So yeah, lots and lots of history there with our relationship, and lots of history with coffee growing in Tanzania. We are lucky enough to have 2 coffees out of Tanzania, Communal Shamba Coffees being the other. But yeah, there's a lot more that other people will tell you about, so I'm going to pass over to Jay now via Ben, just to talk a little bit more about his kind of actual experience traveling from Perth a little closer over to Tanzania.
Yeah, obviously, Jay, you were lucky enough last year to actually go and visit, and it's obviously northern Tanzania is not exactly close to Perth, where you're dialing in from. Do you what was that journey like all the way over there?
Yeah, I suppose for a start, I thought, hey, you're going on an origin trip to Tanzania. I thought Africa, wow, it was really my first real sort of origin trip. I'd done small ones before. This was spectacular. Like, I was so excited. The trip obviously physically was big. You know, you got 4 flights over a day's worth of travel, 24 hours plus. But then on arriving, you know, it was like a child. You know, I was as excited as I was, as hot and sweaty as I was. I was waiting for that, you know, anticipation of, well, what on earth is going to be outside this plane, you know. So, and even on the tarmac, walking out at Kilimanjaro Airport, I thought, oh gee, am I going to get pounced on by a lion or a sneaky leopard? You know, I had that childlike envisaged of what it would be like to be there. And then meeting Leon, what a relief to see his big smiling face. He took me out to the farm. It was a long journey. I don't know if they had aircon, but it didn't feel like they did. It was hot, it was arid, and it was like my first real look at Africa. It was sensational. About an hour from the farm, Leon said, "See up there in the distance, see that mountain range?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, we'll see that highest peak, that one on the left-hand side?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, Acacia Hills is on top of that." And I was like, "Oh, wow, this is exciting." We wind our way up to the very top. We arrive at Acacia Hills at the farm. And my jaw just dropped. It is spectacular. Rolling hills, this farm, just undulating hills of coffee trees. It was like a dream, really. It was fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's super exciting whenever you land in that moment and just get soaked by all of this this kind of experience of the, you know, the place and the smells and the sounds, and especially when you're kind of going there to again have something, a very sensory experience. we've actually got like a really great little interview section that Jay managed to have with Leon, Aideen, and Mark, and we're going to throw to that in a moment. But we're at we're actually at around 14 minutes now, so we're going to jump into having our first round of tasting these coffees while they're still got some nice warmth to them, and we're going to get a little bit of flavour. As you find with coffees, as they cool, they tend to open up and you get a lot more flavours. But when we assess coffees, we generally try to taste them hot, warm and tepid, or just room temperature, in order to see the quality as it kind of progresses from hot through to cool. So we're going to get into tasting these right now, and you can do this at home as well. So we're just grabbing our spoon. I'm also using a spittoon today. I'm going to spit this out because, trust me, I drink enough coffee as it is, but feel free to drink it yourself at home. When you're doing cupping normally, what you want to do is take a small amount of the coffee liquid onto your spoon, and we're going to slurp that off the spoon. That'll vaporize all of the coffee, releasing a lot of the aromatics that really make up how we perceive flavor of coffee. So we want to get into that, and excuse us for the noisy slurpage. You've got 3 people, depending on whether they're muted or not. So again, we're starting with our first lot here, the BK. The really great thing about this coffee that immediately jumps up is, yes, it has that caramel and that honey, but there's some real juiciness balancing that out as well. And again, I think this is where you start to get a lot of those citrus characteristics, that kind of orange comes through. Is that kind of what you're finding on this lot as well, Matt?
Yeah, stole my thunder there, Ben. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all about the orange for me. I know we got it in our pack descriptor, but yeah, it's just all that bright orange there, and there's a depth to it as well. So we describe it as blood orange on the pack, but yeah, it's like just all about the orange.
Yeah, it's a really beautifully balanced coffee. Just for me, this is such a satisfying profile. There's kind of that richness and like the body of the coffee, so that palate weight that's there kind of coats your whole mouth, but it's lightened up by that bit of acidity. A really nice kind of beautiful citrus, as we've said. All right, let's move along to the Pacamara. We're going to do another little obnoxious slurp for you. The thing that immediately strikes me about this coffee is that the body, so that palate weight that we went to, is actually just a touch lighter. There's this initial kind of wash of a lot more of those tropical fruits that I was finding. How's that going down for you there, Matt?
Sorry about supersonic.
Yeah,
it's going down great. Yeah, exactly what I expected it to deliver. Got tons of presence there. Like, it's big mouthfeel. It's got this zestiness to it, and these, like you mentioned, the tropical fruits. Still got the florals at the end, so like this jasmine and honeysuckle. But it's got it's like tropical fruits to me are more pineapple based, like pineapple fruits, and a little cola in there. So it's, that sparkling element. It's really good. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see how that's shifted along, and kind of, yeah, everyone's going to get little different flavors come out just depending on what your sensory memory are and what this triggers off. So we always try and put tasting notes on there that are kind of in the direction of what we've experienced. But this is the fun of like tasting coffee with others, is that we get lots of different flavors out. All right, let's move along to our third coffee here, the Geisha, the honey process. So floral fruit bomb there, right, Jay?
Sorry, just unmuting myself. Yeah, totally. I totally get the florals really, really distinct now, outside of the fragrance now and actually tasting. And I think one thing that's really similar, even though the coffees are all 3 of them are so different, there's a cleanness and a balance about them that is a little bit the same. Like you can almost unite them together, which I find really, really interesting for 3 really, really different coffees.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, obviously the Geisha's got like a whole heap of layers and complexity. It's kind of this thing that the varietal, that particular coffee tree and the fruit from it is so well known for, is kind of the layered fruit and those much more delicate characters. But the thing that really strikes me about this is the commonalities between these is really intriguing. Like they've all got this common thread of some kind of caramelized sweetness, like a honey or caramel or something, and a little bit of that stone fruit citrus kind of acidity. And those things seem to thread all the way through each of these lots. Almost like the soil that they were grown in kind of has created this family bond of flavour. But then each of them is also unique, and they're kind of showing up these different expressions. So it's really cool to be able to kind of taste those differences. Jay, when you visited last year, like what stage were each of these lots at in either harvesting or processing when you were there?
So we were there, I was there in September, and it was sort of the early stages of harvest. But what we did do is we were tasting a lot of the experiments that they were doing, the varieties, different processing on those varieties, and we taste them. They've got a lab there at Acacia Hills, and we're tasting them on the farm. The first fruits really of what they chose to bring forward as their product for that harvest year. Which was really, really exciting. And I tell you what, obviously they choose the best of what they can, but there's a great range of really, really, top class coffees, 84, 85 plus coffees that obviously we don't see here. Just fantastic.
Yeah, that's really cool. So we've actually got some really nice little video here. It was really nice. Let's see if it holds up on all of our internet connections and on this presentation style. We've kind of given it a few test runs, but who knows? And this is a great little couple of questions that Jay did with both Mark Stell, as we said, out of Portland, and Leon and Aideen directly out of Acacia Hills up in northern Tanzania that they recorded for us. We were going to try and do live, but thought that's just too crazy. So let's see if this works. Fire away, Nicole.
Currently, we have people scattered all over Australia, some 10, 11,000 kilometres from Tanzania right now, but they've got your coffee in their hands and they're about to taste. You reside in Portland. What was your journey to owning Acacia Hills? Why Tanzania?
It wasn't the most attractive because of how far it is from me, but it just, I've been everywhere around the world, and I think it's truly what Africa used to have. Their slogan was the world's wildest coffee. That is our farm. What really struck me was I just looked at it as this is just a paradise. I mean, it was so beautiful. The coffee was excellent, but it was so raw. It's like looking at a great coffee, but you see a diamond in the rough. And up until recently, until we fenced the farm, we used to have elephants and buffalo roaming through, and we had to cut that off because they were killing most of our coffee. I met Leon and Aideen. We just became friends and wanted to do a long-term investment and look at what a real partnership might look like from somebody from the coffee roasting side to a coffee grower.
Leon and Aideen, firstly, the name Christianakis doesn't sound Tanzanian. Can you tell us briefly what brought you to Tanzania, and then from there your journey to owning Acacia Hills estate?
Hello, this is Leon and Aideen Christianakis of Acacia Hills. My surname is a Greek surname, and we're lucky enough to have lived here as a family for 3 generations in Tanzania. My grandparents moved from Greece in the late 1800s to the early 1900s.
Hello, I'm Aideen Christianakis, and Leon and I met at university in Dublin. We both did training as pharmacists. After qualifying, we decided we would rather make a life in Tanzania. So we upped sticks and moved to Tanzania in 1996. And we started growing coffee near Arusha. Leon and I decided we'd like to look at establishing a second coffee farm, and Mark was looking at owning a farm at origin. So having spent quite a bit of time looking around the slopes of Mount Oldiani near Ngorongoro crater where Acacia Hills is situated, we eventually came across a farm for sale, which is Acacia Hills.
We've had a relationship for probably over 7 years now. So from your perspective, how does this impact you? How does this relationship impact you? And what does it mean for your business, for your coffees?
Well, I think I met one of your buyers at a Gems of Araku coffee event in India, and we just started chatting, and I think you saw what we saw, is that there's such a potential for this coffee.
Acacia Hills has certainly developed a wonderfully strong relationship with 5 senses, and the word relationship is key here. This relationship year on year has given us, as a grower, income stability. It removes a great deal of uncertainty in what's a wildly fluctuating coffee market.
You guys in general were looking for such great quality and a great partnership that it naturally pushed us to explore options that we wouldn't have normally done, which obviously what you're going to cup today is one of those things, which is we went out and sourced some of the best Panama geishas and El Salvador Pacamaras and brought them in and planted them, and it's 7 years later. So essentially it's taken that long to kind of get some volume.
They've challenged us to try different processes, and we feel now we are beginning to succeed on this. So some of these coffees you will cup here today, it'll be interesting to see what you think.
Okay, one thing that really stood out to me while I was there was the impact that you guys have on your local community.
When we took over the farm, the farm had almost been abandoned. On the first day, I remember we had 7 people employed. Now, generally, it is a little bit seasonal, but generally we run at about 140 people per day. And that, of course, is not without, when it's harvest season, with the labor force can peak up to 300 people.
One of the things that we did about 6 years ago was we did an assessment in the area. There's about 2,000 plus people that live around the farm, and the main assessment thing that came out of this assessment was that 25% of our workforce is always sick from waterborne illness. We also discovered that the average house was walking 6 hours a day for water. It wasn't even a thought. It was like, how can we share this? How can we bring it down? How can we get it funded? So we went out and did some fundraising. Obviously, you guys helped participate in that. And we brought water down almost 2,000 meters by pipe to the actual village. So we look at it as, we want to be great stewards of the area, but we also thought that reality is we need this from our business practice, because we need workers, we need pickers, we need to be healthy, and we want to give back. And this was clearly the easiest and most eye-popping kind of thing we could have done.
Mark, through his coffee experience, realized it's not much good if one farm turns things around, and roasters and buyers would like to visit an area. We
started doing a cupping at the crater with just one other farm, because he's a friend of ours. He's about maybe 40 minutes away. And I mean, since that time, which is I think 2011, 2012, when we first started this, the cupping at the crater, now we have 6-7 farms. We split where we go every day. We cup everybody's coffee. We give great feedback. The reality is us sharing that information and sharing who we're selling to and what their scores are and how they're pushing us to do these things better. It's just we've seen a really good gradual increase of everybody's quality, and not only that, the competition to find out, well, why are they getting an 88 or a 90 of some coffee? What do they do? I always consider it like an adopting a region, and you guys are a prime example of that, where you've kind of adopted us as someone you want to help, polish, I guess, in terms of quality.
All right. So some incredible insights there. Thanks, Jay, for helping put that together, and for our team. You can see the quick editing of all of those cuts together. But it's always so incredible to hear just a little bit more about the real situation or the reality of actually farming and growing that coffee that we really love to drink. And obviously the results of all of those efforts that Mark, Leon, and Aideen have done is really showing up in the cups. It's always super exciting for us to be waiting here each year, right? And kind of knowing that the new harvest is coming in, and that these coffees are really a representation of obviously of the entire climatic conditions and almost the vintage, right? The harvest cycle of growing these coffees throughout the year, and then also all of those new efforts that year on year the team there at Acacia Hills are kind of making to adjust things. So super exciting. We're going to go in and just have another quick little taste of these coffees. They're sitting in front of me, so I just can't help myself. I want to try them again. You might notice now that these coffees have cooled off a little bit. They're going to be showing up a little bit of a different characteristic. So let's see what they do show up. So again, that Bourbon Kent, the BK lot there, wash process, like to me, the acidity is mellowed just a little bit, but that sweetness and kind of the richness and satisfying nature of this coffee is really beautifully held up. Matt, you kind of tasting the same kind of thing, or has it shifted in a different direction for you?
No, it's gone, it's just rounded off. I mean, that balance has come into its own. It's like just really syrupy, it's beautiful. Feels great, tastes great, yeah.
Yeah, it's really just, as I said, just a satisfying coffee, a great coffee for this kind of weather as the temperature drops. I don't know, Jay probably doesn't know what I'm talking about. Perth is always beautiful weather, but over here in Melbourne, it's definitely cold. So on to our next lot there, the Pacamara. Again, the great thing and the real benefit here of tasting these coffees side by side is the contrast really helps you identify what there is different and how to kind of hone in on the different attributes there. So this one, again, that juiciness and the lift in the coffee is really present for me. Matt, has it shifted differently for you?
Yeah, it's the depth and the presence is still there, but yeah, it's definitely that sparkle. The acidity is lifted for me. It's kind of and rounded out. It's just less of a kind of zestiness and more rounded in the acidity, but it's long lasting and really pleasant. It's ringing out for ages, and it's got still a bit of that sparkle. You know, it's yeah, glorious coffee. I love it.
I'm getting some really nice kind of some of that, like, it's almost like a pear characteristic to it, like a dark kind of pear, which is really interesting. Obviously, I'm just throwing stuff off the cuff. That isn't what we have on the tasting notes, but that's what I'm getting today, right here. Jay, talk us through the Geisha.
Just having another taste.
One moment, please, while we slurp away.
Yes, it's definitely mellowed down. Not as juicy as it was. I find it like it's got a bit of a more savoury element coming in, which I think just adds a little bit of complexity as it cools, which is quite interesting. I feel like this has changed for me. It's changed quite a little bit. Less of those sort of ripe, those ripe bergamot type, flavors. Definitely some floral there as well, but more rounded now, like less sort of volatile, I suppose. Yeah, definitely. It's kind of less of those really high notes. It's kind of like condensed down a little bit. But that, as you said, that bergamot, that kind of Earl Grey characteristic, that's such a really distinctive character. To me, it almost comes in the aftertaste. So once I've swallowed, or in this case, spat out. But once we've done that flavour is kind of what lingers, and you kind of almost continually taste it. So yeah, really, all three very different, beautiful coffees. So Matt, in that presentation, or in the little video there from Leon, Nadine, and Mark, they were talking a little bit about what, obviously what a relationship with a buyer like ourselves means to them as like a coffee farmer, in terms of the stability and the way they can plan out their year ahead, and the confidence in that. From your perspective, in terms of going out and creating and managing our coffee program, how do you kind of tend to approach the relationships with the producers that we work with?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I was thinking how I could answer this kind of most succinctly. And I'm, for those of you who know me, I'm there's a bit of an in-joke in Fives that, collaboration's my middle name, and I come from a collaborative background, and I find that that's kind of my in. But obviously right now using the frame of reference is the COVID-19 pandemic, right? Okay, we're doing this, you know, through the medium of technology, and how amazing is that? But we're all kind of experiencing some form of isolation, and I think having a little time to reflect on how important kind of our relationships are, you know, our family, our friends. We're getting to spend more time with people in some cases. You know, we're not seeing others as much as we would like. You know, it's kind of a real focus on, you know, relationships and community. And I think that is the underlying thing that I take forward really in any relationship that I build, which is about people. It's all based on people. Coffee is literally the vehicle in which we use to, you know, continue that relationship. And we're really lucky in coffee, especially in specifically specialty coffee, to be able to have such a community focused sector. But it is literally all about collaboration. You heard Dean, you know, talk about it quite succinctly, and then Mark about this kind of investment. They wouldn't have been able to kind of do certain elements of what they've done in terms of bringing their Geisha and their Pacamara in, if it hadn't been for us providing an avenue to market for it. So it's like that shared risk, that alignment, and that collaboration is essential. And you know, it proffers some great results. And obviously, as you've heard, this relationship is over 7 years old. That's a dream, you know, is to kind of evolve that relationship, evolve the communication, to grow together, to push the boundaries together, to keep connected. And you know, that's, yeah, in a nutshell, exactly what coffee is for me, specialty coffee.
Yeah, look, that's definitely a key way that we kind of look at it, for sure, in terms of when we talk relationship. There's so many different aspects to that term, and how we do it. The human connection is certainly something that's at the core of what we're all about, and what increasingly I think a lot of coffee drinkers are about, in wanting to understand where their product comes from, and the provenance, and also the kind of the sustainability in terms of the human aspect comes from, and the environmental aspect. And I think that these relationships have been great for us, because we've not only get to experience these really incredible new coffees, like literally 2 of the coffees on the table here weren't even in the ground as trees when we first started the relationship with Acacia Hills. And because they knew that they had this reliable kind of partner who was going to be there the next harvest and the next harvest, they could actually expand and kind of do riskier, take on more risk and experimentation that allowed them to explore these things. But at the same time, it's a beautiful thing, because when they're having a difficult year, or we're having a difficult year, and look, let's face it, we're all having difficult years this year, we can have a conversation that's beyond just like a buy and sell thing. We're actually working together on kind of joining this value chain, and keeping the coffee kind of flowing, and keeping that a positive thing for everyone involved. So yeah, look, super exciting. You know, the words from Leon and Nadine and Mark were definitely pretty inspiring. We've actually got a second part to that video series, which we probably don't have time to play for you all today, but we're going to follow up after this, and we'll make sure to post up both of these videos from the crew there, that you can have a listen to, and continue to enjoy these coffees. I think just before we kind of start wrapping things up, we might have a couple of questions. I think, Nicole, you've got a couple of points there.
Yeah, we sure do. It's probably more open to the team. Jay and Matt might be able to weigh in on this one. Someone would like to know why Acacia Hills have chosen a honey process for the Geisha. Oh,
yeah. I mean, you can wax lyrical about this in terms of like your real-time experience, Jay. But I'm glad somebody mentioned something, because I omitted to talk about the honey process. It's a bit of a risk, right? You know, who takes a Geisha and puts it through a honey process? I mean, it's predominantly washed, and yeah, wow, I mean, what a result. I mean, actually, the washed and the honey side by side, I actually prefer blind the honey. You know, I guess for me, it's there's more pronounced acidity in the washed, but yeah, when this cools, it's just a whole nother thing. So yeah, I don't know why they went down that route, but you know, the Geisha and the Pacamara relationships have been something that we've discussed in terms of you know, in terms of being an avenue to market and making sure that we would take them on and having some discussion around what they consist of and not the processing. So this was a surprise to me personally, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. A great surprise. Don't know about you, Jay. Have you got more context to that?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that a little bit, because it was really interesting when I mentioned I was there at Acacia Hills. We're tasting the first fruits in the lab there, and there was, I mean, you're looking at it like a handful of samples that were selected. There was so many coffees that were sensational. They were really good. Now they obviously had to come to a point of realization: what's tasting the best? What can we sell? I mean, the honey for them, a huge risk. Really, it's time intensive, it's labor intensive, and for them, they were just going, all right, let's get the best we can. It was probably the hands down on the table on the day, the honey. I mean, I think Mark scored it off the chart, and I was like, hey, come on. 99, no, not really. But it was really amazing, and it sort of opened my eyes. And I think that's why, from that point, they just said, we've got to do this. So I'm sure there'll be more to come, and maybe there'll be some different processing to come. But like you, Matt, I love this coffee. It's actually been my favourite thus far.
Great. Nicole, were there any other questions that people had wanted answered?
Probably just one final one. Which filter method would you recommend everyone to drink the remainder of their beans? What's everyone's favourite home?
I think there's maybe 3 different filter methods dialing in here. I know Matt's got a preference for the inverted AeroPress, the Slater method. I don't know about Jay's, but look, I think it's just however you can kind of brew it at home. I don't think that there's necessarily a preferred methodology there. I think I've been actually brewing a lot of coffee at home at the moment using a French press or a plunger, just for lack of filters. But generally, I think something with a filter paper is just going to clean up the profile a little bit and help you kind of get the final cup just a little bit more refined. So we're talking anything like a Clever coffee dripper is a really nice immersion brewing method, or a Kalita pour over, or something along those lines are really great options. But realistically, however you brew it at home, as long as you're keeping the recipe right, using good quality water and the right temperature, I think you'll be set. All right. Any other questions?
Probably. I haven't scrolled down. Someone would like to know what your cupping scores were on these coffees. Ooh. I'm guessing that was directed for you, Jay, at Origin in Tanzania.
Yeah, so at Origin, I think I remember the honey Geisha. I think I scored it an 87.25, which I thought, you know, when you're tasting blind, we've got people from all around the world here. You know, like there was, you know, probably 10 of us. All coffee people, a lot of Q graders there, and I'm thinking, oh no, you know, like, have I gone over? Have I gone up? I haven't been scoring, because a lot of what I do is in-house and quality control here. So and it was really interesting. I think Mark scored an 89. I was like, whew. But it was very varied, and I think this is when you get to coffees like this is where you will divide a little bit. I think now realistically we've had a really good chance to look at it. I think it's definitely an 87 in my book. Maybe you guys can talk on that for the honey at least.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that the interesting thing is that these 3 coffees as well, I don't know if we mentioned this originally, but the BK lot, the Bourbon Kent, is actually representative of quite a large volume of quantity of coffee. This is actually one of our kind of house coffees that we get in quite a bulk volume of. So, you know, we've got 3 coffees here, the Pacamara and the Geisha are both like relatively small lots, and we look for higher scoring coffees there. So again, yeah, off the top of my head, you know, just tasting how we have today, I'd kind of agree with Jay. You know, I think that the Geisha is kind of sitting in the 87 and 88 kind of point coffee. Some really great characteristics, held up really nicely, compressed a little bit at the end there, but still so many of those great flavors. And on the Pacamara front, I think just kind of a little bit less. We're sitting like 86s along those lines. Still some great characteristics, but just not quite as complex as obviously a Geisha. And then the Acacia Hills, I think this is tasting really phenomenal. Again, I'm probably a bit swayed because it's so just hits the spot for me. Not a particularly complex coffee, but just really beautifully built. So yeah, again, I'd be kind of sitting 84.5, 80, maybe even up to an 85 point coffee with the BK lot there. So that's kind of my snapshot scores off the top.
Wow, I've just checked out the scores. So we score everything across the country with Q grader cuppers, and that's obviously Ben mentioned the cupping protocol earlier. So we try to we get calibrated across the country. So we've got our WA facility, and we've got our big facility. So we get as many people involved in that sensory party as possible. You know, it makes sense, and yeah, you're pretty much bang on actually, Ben. I mean, you're slightly above on the BK lot. Where we were, but, you know, I think, but the roast on these has been nailed as well. But I guess you're definitely in the 87s, and the Pacamara in the 86s, and the BK lot was in the late 83s, early 84s. So a good spread.
Cool, nice. Anything else there for us, Nicole?
We might have to wrap that up now, guys. We're a little bit over time, I think. So yeah.
We've been rolling for a little while. Yeah, well, look, thank you to everyone who has dialed in. We hope that it's helped you get a better picture of not only Acacia Hills, but a little bit further beyond into Tanzanian coffees and kind of just have an enjoyable tasting experience. We're certainly keen to do this again. We're certainly keen to do it again. And if anyone has any suggestions of how we can improve this, please send them through. We'll follow up with posting those videos and take a chance to watch those as you drink through the rest of your samples. Thank you to Matt, Jay, and Nicole for helping pull all this together.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thanks everyone, and we'll catch you next time. Ciao.